Hello, hello. Welcome to our weekly episode of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. I'm your host, Amanda, and I'm here with my awesome co-host.
Oh, I'm Meagan.
So we are so happy you're here. We are your messy, imperfect homeschool mom friends. We both love spending time with our respective kids, and we love homeschooling on the good days, the bad days mostly, and all the days in between, right? If you are a daytime pajamas wearing, messy bun rocking homeschool mom, you've totally found your people.
Absolutely. Today, we'll be talking about respecting our kids and likely about how our own parenting styles play a role in each of our homes. Why this might not feel like it is directly related to homeschooling, we both feel confident that your parenting style and the relationship you form with your kid or kids is the foundation of everything. Without a strong foundation, homeschooling and everything else might feel a bit harder. Many of us have social media feeds that are filled with parenting humor, homeschooling tips, and if you're like me, and probably Amanda too, a bunch of bucket list travel destinations. True story?
Yeah, there's a lot of travel.
Exactly. It doesn't take more than a few minutes of scrolling through your For You page to realize that parenting styles vary greatly and are super polarizing. So, today we're going to talk about how we can respect the children in our lives and how or even whether or not it does vary based on parenting style. But first, we kick off all of our episodes the same with our recap of our week. We're all about keeping it real. Some weeks are totally amazing, and other weeks are just complete clusterfucks. So let's catch up. How's your week been, Amanda?
It's been not too bad, really. Very exciting earlier this week, we were able to go see Malcolm Gladwell on his book tour. I think my 10-year-old might have been the youngest person in the audience. And before the night was over, he was already more than 40 pages into his newest book. We got a signed copy of the book for attending the book signing. So that was fun. And, just kind of one of those things, like when we throw things like that in, everything gets a little wonky, but we're still, it's early October when we're filming, and we're still like trying to get the hang of the new school year. And unfortunately for us, first quarter classes are wrapping up and we're about to dive into second quarter classes, which means things are a little wonky again. And so we're just, as far as homeschooling going, like our biggest struggle is finding the right balance, right? About a week and a half ago, we decided to implement some new rules, like I don't homeschool after 1 o'clock, because I found that I was getting really frustrated with Winston, and like, come on, you should be done because I have other things I have to do and I can't, and like really pushing him. And we were arguing a lot about it. And so I was like, well, instead of doing that, how about I just create the boundary? Like this is not working, obviously, and we're just arguing about it. And so I'm going to create the boundary that I need, which is I have given you an amount of schoolwork that you can completely finish by 1 o'clock outside of classes that we don't have control over their timing, right? But the work that you need to do with me and in our home can be done by 1 o'clock if you so desire to complete it by 1 o'clock. So I will be available to you to help with all of the things until 1 o'clock. And after 1 o'clock, I'm done homeschooling and it's time for me to do the things that I need to do. I need to take care of my volunteer stuff and podcast stuff and, and all of these kinds of things. And so it's still early days. It's definitely not that clear cut, right? Anytime you implement a new plan, it's not like, oh, ta-da, it's working.
Miraculous solution. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Cha-ching, it's all good. But yeah, it's fine. It's going fine. Yeah. How about you? I mean, you guys are still like insanity, right? Like I would prefer to never move again just because I don't yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot. And this move is different from all of our other moves because my husband changed careers completely. And so all of our other moves were paid for by his company and we didn't do anything, right? I've never paid real estate commission. I've never packed a box. I mean, I've moved all over the place and I've never done kind of these things with moving. And so this one is very different in so many ways, right? We are moving out of the US. We are not moving to another home right away. We're going to world school for a while. We're getting rid of almost everything we own. I have to pay real estate commission, which really sucks, right? So all of that is like quite different. So my location is changing from week to week. Last week I podcasted in my daughter's room, but as I kind of pack and purge rooms, yeah. So today I'm in the kitchen, which is like obviously the busiest part of our home, and I'm at a folding table. And I said to the kids, you need to be out of the kitchen by 4 because I'm on with Amanda and you can have the kitchen back later. Right. So it's like, everybody come in and get whatever you need now. So yeah, it's just been like all that. And, we'd had the inspection. So thankfully there was nothing major on the inspection, but it's just like all this like pissy little stuff that we have to take care of for the new people and whatever. So been like checking all that stuff off the list and, whatever, but it's exciting. Overall, I'm super pumped. The only thing that's been a little bit like, whoo, is, and this is a business idea for anybody out there who might be interested. If you started a service where you helped facilitate paperwork for service dogs traveling and kids who take ADHD meds traveling, I would pay you any amount of money right now to figure this out. I have literally been waking up at like 8 o'clock in the morning, which is not my time. Like some people are listening, they're like, that's not a big deal. That's a big deal. Okay. Don't like that time at all. Very rarely see it. So our first stop is Poland, and I need paperwork from the chief pharmaceutical inspectorate's office for him to bring, for my kiddo to bring his ADHD meds into the country. And so I would call, and I mean, obviously it's Poland. I'm not expecting someone to cater to me in English, but like even the phone menu, like I don't even know what button to push, right? To like get to the right department. So I had a whole Google Translate thing typed up that was like, I am a person using a translator. Please don't hang up. And then I like typed a little bit of my question. And like when the person would answer, I'd hit play and they would like, and I found this really, really nice man named Adam who he spoke English and he helped me tremendously and he gave me his email address. I'm like, thank you. But I'm still working on that. I have to, when we're done podcasting today, I have to sign up for a fax account, which I feel like Marty McFly going to like 1986, but I have to sign up for an online fax account to fax some paperwork from his doctor over to Poland to kind of clear the pathway and all that kind of stuff. But so yeah, if anybody out there is like, I know things about ADHD, dude, start a company. I will pay you. I would pay you any amount of money right now to take care of this. So
Yeah,
that's
I
been the
see
big
that
headache.
a lot, actually. Yeah, I see that a lot in travel groups of parents like struggling to figure that out or not even realizing that it's an issue. So
Right.
yeah, I do think that is probably an untapped market, right?
Right. I would pay anybody. Oh my gosh, it's such a
Yeah.
headache, right? So yeah, so I mean, it'll all be good. I'll figure it out. And my friend Adam at the chief pharmaceutical inspectorate told me there's this office I can go to in Warsaw that'll give me a paper that'll actually make moving within the EU easier with his meds. Like it'll give him like an EU pass for methylphenidate. And I was like, thank you, Adam. I got up this morning at 8 and tried calling them, but my Google Translate trick didn't work and they just hung up on me like 6 times in a row. So I was like, I think I'm just going to have to go show up when I get there and be like, can I please have this piece of paper?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a thing, and I mean, it just stinks because it's like there's so many people out there abusing the drug that's the only reason that we have this giant freaking headache. But it is what it is. It's been life-changing for my kids. So I'll jump through whatever hoop they need me to in order to make that happen. So that's what I'll be doing. I'll be faxing documents to Poland.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
All right. So recap done. Let's talk respecting our kids. I think that we both feel pretty strongly about respecting our children as humans, right? I mean, they're human beings and they deserve a fundamental amount of respect, at least in our opinion. Though I can say with a high degree of confidence that it does look different in our two homes. I also know there's a related meme or two that regularly floats around on social media that really grinds your gears. How about you tell us about that?
Oh, I can't, I think there's a couple of them too where it's like just punitive. Like if you want your remote control for your PlayStation, you have to do these things or whatever. But there's one that's the internet and it's like, they give a list of, the parents will give a list of like the dishwasher needs to be emptied and your room needs to be cleaned. Like send me pictures of those and I'll reply with the Wi-Fi password, like if the parents are at work or whatever, And I'm like, I get it, right? I get that you need your kids to do those things, but I'm just not like, I find that so punitive and carrot and stick and just disrespectful. And like, I don't love it. Like my kids pick up their rooms, my kids empty the dishwasher, but they just do it because they're a member of the household, right? Like they don't do it because I'm holding something over them to be like, you can't have this, And like the other night, my kids came home, my boys were out playing Pokemon and they came home and I said to my youngest, they have like assigned chores. They used to have a rotation and they voted amongst themselves that they each had a chore that they hated so much that they never wanted to do it again. And so like Liam was like, I will empty the dishwasher for the rest of my life if I never have to take out the trash. And Ada was like, deal. So Liam's on dishwasher. He has been for ages. And like he came home and I go, dude, I so need the dishwasher emptied. The sink had a bunch of dishes and he'd been out and it was done running and whatever. And he goes, "Oh, can I eat first?" And I'm like, "Of course you can eat first." You know what I mean? Like, you're hungry. You just got home. So he ate and then he emptied the dishwasher. You know what I mean? And it's like, I don't I don't have to browbeat and like all that kind of stuff. And I think part of that, like to your point earlier when we were talking, was like the foundation, right? When you lay that foundation of mutual respect, it's like, I'm not nagging, I'm not harping. They know I pull my fair share around here too, that's for sure. So like, they're like, oh, if I get asked to do something, that's my contribution. And so it always just kind of like drives me a little bit crazy, because I feel like there was a post in a group that I think you and I both left, Amanda, a Facebook group, that awful one, right? Did you finally leave that one, or are you still there?
Oh, I got kicked out.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I got kicked out for pointing out that one of the photos was a lie. Like, this is us at the airport. And I'm like, I've never seen an airport with theater seating.
Oh,
And
I
then
remember that.
I got removed immediately. So,
It's
yeah.
this super toxic
Yeah.
homeschool parenting group that we were both in. And it was funny because one time there was a story that where this kid, they were supposedly, we were always, there's always been like kind of a big debate about if a bunch of the stuff in there is just kind of like clickbait garbage. But anyway, this parent said they went to the doctor and the kid needed to sign off for permission for the parent to have access to their medical records, right? And the
Mhm.
kid wouldn't sign it. And the parent was up in arms, and how is this possible? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm
Mhm.
like, but if you think about it, like, these kids have so little control over their own life. That was like the one thing. There's so many things that are probably held over that kid, where it's like, if you do this, I'll give you that. Or if you do this, I will take that away. Right. And it's like he
Mhm.
finally had like this one shred of power, of something that he could hold on to, and the
Mhm.
parent was livid. And I was like, where do you think he learned it from? I'm just saying, like,
Yeah. No, and in that specific example, the kid tried to negotiate. Like, if you give
right.
me this, I'll give you access. And they were so upset. And it's one of,
Yeah.
like you said, it's one of those things. Like,
You
and
taught
we'll
them the
talk about
game.
that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like, we'll talk about that modeling and, and like
Yeah.
you get what you give and all of that. Like, I don't know how that's a surprise.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, I mean, I've never made my kids do anything to earn the Wi-Fi password. They live here. We all live here.
So I am going to say in our house, my kiddo is like deathly allergic to cleaning. So this idea that like your kid, if you do this and you have this great relationship with your kid and you parent well and they're just going to like
It's not happening.
tidy, like I'm just going to put that out there, right? Maybe I have a terrible relationship with Winston. I,
I
I
don't
think
think
I,
so.
I think we're pretty good. In his defense, he comes by it honestly. My brothers and I were also terrible about cleaning. The number of times I got grounded as a kid for not cleaning or not picking up properly. So, don't, if you're listening to this and you're like, this is insane. Not every
I'm the
kid wants to
oddball,
clean up.
apparently, not
Like,
you. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
kid also does not clean up. So yeah, there's that. But I can see where you're coming from. That idea of like everyone else in the house is allowed to use the Wi-Fi. Like, why would your kid have to earn it in a different way? And I'm sure there are some parents, I'm not positive they're the ones that would be listening to our podcast, but I'm sure there are some parents that are like, well, I pay for it, so I get it, and they
Right.
don't pay for it, so they have to earn it. I'm not necessarily there. I will say that I think in my house, things definitely operate a little bit more on a not all things are equal dynamic than it does in yours, right? For me, at least part of that goes back to that previous episode we did about how brains are still developing, right? That frontal lobe is still developing well into our 20s. So, like, for instance, there is less TV time and less screen time in general for the kid than there is for the adults in the house. Movies and books still definitely get screened and approved generally by me. I'm the one that does the research, but my husband obviously has a say in that. Now, that's not to say that what's okay in our house would be okay in your house, right? We're pretty flexible and open with talking about things that other people might not be comfortable with. Like, we did Pretty Woman. I know, and we had a long
Yeah.
conversation about prostitution and sex work and how it's as old as time, and stigma around that, and all kinds of things like that. And that's, with a 10-year-old, I know not everyone is like, hey, let's talk about that with a 10-year-old, right? What is okay in our house is not okay in everyone else's house. But there's still definitely that sense of gatekeeping, right? I'm still definitely doing gatekeeping in our house. That said, I do think it's really important as the adult in the situation to model positive behavior in general. Like, yeah, you're doing some gatekeeping with things that you feel are important, but also you need to model. And I'm not big on that, like, do as I say, not what I do. And of course, I mean, we're human. Everyone's going to not do this 100% of the time. Everyone is going to occasionally have that thing that they're like, yeah, I know, but like, do be better than me, do better than me, right? Like, that's just a fact of life, I think. But, modeling good behavior, whether that's being aware of your screen time habits or, being mature enough to say, hey, I'm sorry. I really handled that poorly. It wasn't my best version of myself. And I'm going to commit to working on that. Like, after things go like super sideways and you said or did something that you wish you hadn't as a parent, because it's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like it's going to happen to everyone. Modeling could be showing your kids how to resolve conflict in a healthy way with your partner after a disagreement or a fight. I am not one of those people that says like, oh, your kids should never see you argue with your partner. The reality is conflict happens. The
Right.
important part is that they learn conflict happens and it can be resolved in a healthy way. It doesn't involve physical violence. It doesn't involve insulting someone. It doesn't involve putting them down. It doesn't involve sweeping it under the rug and hoping it doesn't come back out from under the rug, like that cloud of dust that poofs out when you accidentally walk across the rug. Like, show them healthy ways, model healthy ways of having these intrapersonal relationships. And I think too, giving yourself grace after you make a mistake is so important for modeling and really ties into that idea of respecting your kids and teaching them how to respect themselves, right? If you don't give yourself grace, your kids won't grow up learning that they are deserving of grace when they mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's far, far better to teach them now that everyone makes mistakes and a mistake is only a mistake if you refuse to learn from it. Like, I think that's way better than teaching them like, hey, I'm always perfect. I never get anything wrong. I never do anything wrong, Or the flip side, I know plenty of people who, when they make a mistake, they beat themselves up, right? They're, oh, that was so dumb. I can't believe, like, how did I let that happen? Like, what was I thinking? Like, that's also not great modeling and not, again, it's nothing. Yeah, it's about you, but it's also about how much you respect your kids. Is that what you want them to take away? Is that because you're actively teaching them to behave in one way or another, whether you realize it or not.
Right.
And so like respecting your kids enough to be like, I'm going to try my best to live the life that I hope you live as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with everything, right? And so it's interesting because, like you said, we likely carry out our respect for our kids in different ways in our homes. But the funny thing is, like reading through the document, it's like I basically agree with I agree with everything that you're saying. It's like just the way you're implementing things are different than the way I'm implementing things. We have a different way of achieving the same result or a similar result, right? No,
Sure.
no two
Yeah.
households are ever going to be the same, right? And so, but I
Mhm.
totally agree with all of that, right? Even though we take a different approach to doing it. The other thing that I thought was interesting when I was kind of like reviewing our notes beforehand and stuff too was the gatekeeping piece, right? And oh my gosh, did I burn some brain cells trying to think through this before we recorded today, thinking like I gate kept more when my kids were younger, and I'm
Mhm.
not now. But I'm also a different mom than I was then. So I'm like,
Mhm.
was I gatekeeping because I was parenting in a similar way, but my kids were younger? Or was I gatekeeping because I wasn't as blase or free range or whatever it might be as I am now? Like I couldn't figure it because you can't go back in
Mhm.
time, right?
Yeah.
You can't, you're not the same person that you were 8 years ago or 10
Yeah.
years ago or whatever. But I'm
Mhm.
like, I totally remember my oldest kid wanted to read Harry Potter and I wasn't ready for him to start that, not because of the witchcraft thing, but I hadn't read it. It's not my genre of reading. Sorry.
Mhm.
Totally not my jam. But my parents had it. My parents said it gets pretty dark towards the end. And I was like, okay, no problem. And he was dying to read it and this, that, and the other thing. And it was funny because he had the full set in his room. Somebody had given them to him as a gift, like as a newborn. Somebody was like, these will change his life. Clearly a Harry
Mhm.
Potter person. This is before, of course, too, that we found out J.K. Rowling is a total piece of crap, by the way. So
I know
putting
that
that
it,
out
that it,
there.
I think that's complicated, right? I mean, like
Right.
you cannot separate the two, but you also cannot ignore the fact that it's, I mean, it's a big piece of culture and how you choose to enjoy Harry Potter while also doing your best to limit the amount of money you line her pocket with
It's
is
a
important to
balancing
think
act.
about.
Yeah.
It's important to be aware of and to think about. We also, I have not my genre. I've never read the books. I still haven't to this day, but my kiddo loves them and connects with his uncle, on a very deep level over them and that kind of stuff. So I'm there with you. It's
It's
a complicated
complicated.
issue.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
So he had a bookshelf in his room, and I had the Harry Potter stuff way up high because he was young and I didn't
Mhm.
feel like he was ready for them. And I thought, well, I'll just, obviously the space that's lower that he can reach, that's accessible, should be things that he's reading now. And I'll stick those up high. And when he's ready for them, we'll bring them down. And
Mhm.
we kind of had this silent battle that went on for a little while where I would find them down on the floor, like on a lower shelf. And then I'd be like, oh, and I'd put them up higher, like not really thinking. And it just kept happening. And then one day we were at the library and I was kind of like with the kids and whatever, and he was wandering and he was looking at books. Like, I'm pretty okay with that. And he was, I think, 8 at the time. And we were in a children's library. I felt like he was really safe and I couldn't find him. And I started to panic a little bit because I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? He had found the first book and tucked himself in a corner somewhere and was sitting and reading it. And I was
To
like,
read.
I've officially
Mhm.
lost the battle. But prior to that, I had been saying, like, I think it's going to get too dark, this, that, the other thing. P.S. Turns out he was anxious as hell by the time he was done like severe anxiety because
Mm-mm.
they were too dark at the end. FYI. Like, hello. Pretty sure we said that. And then the funny thing was my youngest did the same thing, made it all the way to the middle of the 7th book and got scared and wouldn't finish them. And to this
Mhm.
day, and I'm like,
Huh.
this is
How
kind of why I
interesting.
said you're
Yeah.
too young to read this series, but whatever, they both got super
Mhm.
scared by it.
Yeah,
So
we had a similar battle with actually reading the books, right? And so also at 8, I gave in, and but after consulting some other mom friends who actually read them and and know them, because like I said, not my genre, and I'm not going to read it so that I can, like, he reads way more than I could ever keep up with,
right,
and we like
same.
different things for the most part. So I asked a bunch of mom friends, I talked with my brother. Everyone was kind of like, A, it gets really dark, and B, Harry kind of turns into a jerky teenage boy by a certain point, and that's probably not really like the modeling that you want for him. And so everyone kind of agreed. I think it was maybe the first 3 or 4 were probably okay, as like, introduce those now and then wait a little while to introduce the
Mm.
next. And so that's what we did. And then of course that becomes a point of contention. Like, well, when do I get the next one? When do I get the next one?
Right. Yeah, it's like, hey, if you had been this age when they came out, you'd have been waiting a year between books or 2 years between books. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
hello, you know.
Yeah, just because you were able to read the whole thing in 3 days doesn't mean that you automatically deserve the next one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I think I did gatekeep a little bit more back then than I do now. Now they're older and they just kind of do their thing. And, we watch stuff that is so wholly inappropriate by most people's standards and, whatever, but we'll watch it together sometimes. We enjoy comedy. My youngest kid can't do concerts because the vibration. So the lights and sound I can kind of mitigate a little bit with, darkening glasses and noise canceling headphones and stuff like that. But the vibration in the building itself cannot be
Mhm.
mitigated in any way. And so comedy kind of became our thing.
Mhm.
And so we do a lot of, and of course, there are very few, like Nate Bargatze's pretty family friendly and stuff like that. But we've seen John Mulaney as a family, like me and the kids, at least anyway. So yeah, I'm not gatekeeping so much anymore, but I could totally see, like, when my kids were younger, I absolutely did too. So it's been a journey, right? It's been a little bit of a process, but I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, I think your earlier point about how much of it is age related and how much of it is a true change in parenting style and philosophy. And I'm not sure that you can actually really, that anyone can easily separate those out and
Right.
figure out where that line is.
When we're on like season 8 of Homeschool Moms Unfiltered, you can kind of track, maybe you can journal it for the next like 8 years and let us
Yeah, because I
know.
journal so well. I do not. Okay, spoiler alert. Journaling is not my jam. Ooh.
Yep. So you never know. All right. So we're going to continue our conversation about this crazy concept of respecting kids and all that. But beforehand, we want to just remind you that we host a Patreon account. There's a free resource over there for you. I feel terrible every week when we show up and say, we have a free resource about hurricanes. Yesterday, we're recording this on a Thursday. Overnight, Milton made landfall in Florida. There's another freaking one lined up in the Atlantic now. Like, we're all I live in Charleston. We're all just done. We're done. We're all over it. The rivers are still cresting from Helene. Like we're not over it. But anyway, at the beginning of hurricane season, it seemed like a really great theme for a unit study, and we put it out. And it is, right? I'm sure people have tons of questions. Knowledge is power. If your kids are nervous about natural disasters or anything like that, knowing more about it is helpful. So that's over there, and you can just go pick it up. You don't have to sign up or anything. You can just go
Yeah.
grab it, get a feel for our content and stuff like that. We've got 2 others that are there for our subscribers. Every subscriber gets a free unit study every month. And then our VIP subscribers also have access to live meetings, which are Q&As about homeschooling and a social event that we have once a month to build community and things like that. So, and when I say VIP, Amanda, when you hear VIP, are you like, I'm out, like too rich for my
Yeah,
blood,
like no,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. We're not those kind of people. The highest tier of membership is $12 a month, and that includes your 2 live meetings. So there's pretty much nowhere that you can get customized homeschool coaching for less than $12 an hour, which is what it breaks down to. So
Well, yeah, and I know for me, earlier in the pandemic, there were a lot of these like moms night outs, virtual moms nights out where you could like log on and, color and have a drink and chat about whatever. And they were charging like $5 to $10 a pop. And I was more than happy to sign up for them. And because I have a lot of health issues, right? We don't talk about it a lot here on the podcast because it's a big flashpoint thing, whatever. But I have long COVID and we are still like, technically COVIDing. We're really careful about not going out to bars and we don't eat inside restaurants unless the numbers are super low or that we're, just in a situation like we gave up when it was like negative 20 degrees in Finland and we ate outside for a meal and it was so miserable. Like the food
yeah,
was freezing, the soup was like freezing on its way to your mouth. Like we're like, okay, like we've got to find like the next meal that we have to have. We'll just suck it up and we'll eat as fast as we can and like all of that. But at this point, I would love more options for
yeah.
virtual, like getting together and having community and doing all of that. But like you can stay at home and you can meet people beyond the people that you have been getting together
Yeah.
with, and running into. Like I know before the pandemic, I would do these kind of social happy hour things and I met the same people over and over, right? I mean, it's like, it's all the same people looking like, well, we didn't click the last 4 times we ran into each other at a networking event or a happy hour. Like we're not really going to click this time, but hey, how are you? Like,
Well,
um,
I mean, we're going to talk
yeah.
about in our book club episode this week too about building community and friendship circles and how important it is and things like that too, right?
Mhm.
I created a group when we moved here for teenagers because in the homeschool world, there's always so much stuff for little kids and then not as much
Mhm.
stuff for teenagers, right? And so I built this group for teenagers and it's a secular group and every single person who joined the group was religious and for the most part, everybody was really respectful about making it a secular space. Like I'm not saying you have to be an atheist to join my group.
Mm.
Like everybody is welcome. But when that is the foundation of your existence, which in the South is a huge thing, it just
Yeah.
comes out in natural. It would be like, oh, well, we were at this youth group thing, or oh, they have a lock-in at church, or oh, we have this, or like, and it just pervaded the group, and it was like, I was just looking for some secular space where I could show up, and people weren't talking about hurricanes being controlled by remote controls and it's a government conspiracy. Like I can't. That's where I
Yeah.
live. And it's like trying to
Mhm.
find people that you can have a decent conversation with sometimes. It's pretty freaking hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's nice to be able to like expand your circle a little bit too, because I had to find my circle online. I mean, that's how we met. We've never even met in person, right? I don't know
Yeah.
if people are tuning in, they wouldn't even realize like
Yeah.
we're both going to be in Europe world schooling at the beginning of next year. I have high hopes that we'll be able to cross paths next year and actually meet in person, which would be pretty exciting.
On an entirely different continent.
Right, exactly. Or kids could
Yeah.
meet, it could be fun. But yeah, I mean, I found my group online because
Mhm.
trying to find them in person was really hard. So yeah. So anyway, come join us. If you go to our website, homeschoolmomsunfiltered.com, you'll find a link to Patreon there. It's in our social, like our Instagram has a link in there and whatever, DM us if you can't find it, like we're there. So come hang out with us and go grab your resource about hurricanes. I swear downloading it, like it's not like every download generates a hurricane. I swear we're not conspiracy theorists, but like,
No.
go take
And
the hurricane unit.
yeah, and the thing about the hurricane unit is that I really like is that it's all links that actually, like, when you download it, you have actual links you can just click on and go, right? Like a lot of times it's like, oh, well, look up this, Google that. Like, this is not that thing. This is really like, you want to know about the Cajun Army, like click here, like
Yeah.
it's a great resource. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. We vetted them all to make sure that you're not going to sift through and be like, "Oh, cringeworthy material." We've done that
Yeah.
for you.
Yep, exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
it's so hard, right? When you have to go to Google and then actually read like 10 links to try to find the one that you like.
Yeah.
Um, all
Yeah.
right, so we're still generally talking about respecting kids. So for me, like still kind of on that topic of modeling, here's something that might be controversial. I think it's important to put yourself, the adult, in timeout if you're going to use timeouts in your house. So again, I think it helps create this idea that it isn't just a punishment so much as a conscious stepping away from an escalating situation to, calm down, to create time and space to self-regulate. But I do wonder what you think of that, Megan, because I know in our house, like we definitely used time out. And at one point we used time ins because as foster parents, we were discouraged from using time out. And we were told that we were supposed to now be using time ins, which is a whole other thing. But I also know that timeouts are like not okay in gentle parenting. And so I know like gentle parenting is how you generally identify as your style of parenting, right, Megan?
Generally, yeah. I mean, through this though, through our conversations, like preparing for this episode, I was like, maybe I'm more eclectic parenting who leans hard into gentle. I don't know. But again, it's that thing, right? Like I was
Mhm.
thinking back to when my kids were small and timeouts, right? Because I saw your notes and we were talking about it and I was like, okay, I mean, we had this little turtle. It was a little stool and we still have it. My mom uses it as a footstool now in her little chair that she has over at her place. But that was the timeout turtle. And so but I think it was more like I remember sometimes, like, let's say you're on the playground and it's getting heated, right? Between whether it's two of my own kids or my kid and another kid or whatever. Like they would totally come and sit down on the bench by me at the playground. But it was usually kind of like let's just take a minute and breathe, like we just need
Mhm.
like a cool down period. And then we'd kind of sit there and have a conversation about whatever was happening. And then it was like, do you feel like you can go back and play and mix with the crowd and make great choices and be like, yeah, okay, and then they'd go back off and do it. So I mean, we called it the timeout turtle. It did have that name but it wasn't that common. I think it was like my absolute last resort, like disastrous situation, but we did have a timeout turtle, so it existed, and they knew the name. I will say though, we've talked before about the fact that my third kid, I had to parent completely differently, and it took me a little while to figure that out. And so I will never forget, he was probably not even 2. And they were playing, and he kept hitting his sister, and she was 3, right? 3.5, maybe almost 4. And he's hitting her. And I keep telling him, we don't hit. It's not the gentle parenting way, right? Like blah, 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 blah,
Mhm.
blah, right? All that stuff. And so finally he looked at me. Now, this was before he and I found our groove. This was when I was still ending most of my days in tears. So he looked at me and gave me this look that was just like, you ready? And I'm like, I didn't even know what he was doing. And he hauled off and he whacked his sister. And then he looked at me and he goes, no, no, Liam, that's not nice. And then he marched over. He did like this kind of like defiant march, walks over to the timeout turtle, sits down on the turtle, crosses his arms and looks at me. And I swear, I mean, I don't even think he was 2 yet. And I swear if he could have if looks could say things in actual words, he would have been like, what the fuck are you going to do about it now? And I just sat there and I was like, I
Mhm.
don't know what I'm going to do now. Like, what do you do with that? Like I
Yeah.
had no idea. I was like, well,
Mhm.
clearly that doesn't work. Eventually, he and I found our groove. And genuinely, what the kid needed was more affection and more like when he was struggling, he
Mhm.
needed help regulating. And that's really what it was. He didn't need punishment, he needed affection. And it worked. But it took us a little while to figure that out.
Yeah.
But
Well,
our oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, like, different kids, right? And different
Right.
things. That story reminds me of my middle brother, who my parents really struggled in some ways parenting him because he was very much a like, think of the worst possible consequence and then decide if it was worth it. And if it
Right.
was worth it, go ahead and then just be like, I've taken, like, I did it. I'm happy I did it. And now I'm ready for the consequence. And they were very much like, what do we, like,
Yeah.
how do, like, what can you do when the kid has already done the chess moves and been like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah.
Or we had, so I have an only, but we're foster parents. And so we have had many foster loves, is what we call them. And we had this one little girl for a while. And this was at the time when you were supposed to do time ins. So you could put them in time out, but you were supposed to stay there present. And before they got up, like at the 2-minute mark, you would have a conversation about what happened and why it wasn't ideal and what you were going to do differently. And, like this kind of reconciliation process with this toddler before they get up and go on with their day. And she was having no part of it. And there was one day where I it wasn't one of those, like, not my finest parenting moment in any way, shape, or form. And at the time I have 2 young kids. She was 2 and my young kiddo, I think, was 4, maybe 5. And they both, it had just been a bad day. And I put her in one of these time ins and she refused to speak with me. She refused. And this 2-year-old sat and she was like, I'm going to wait you out. Like, you're
Yeah.
going to let me up before. And it went on for 2 hours. I kid you not. This 2-year-old sat there with her arms crossed, looking at me like, you are a dumb, like, for 2 hours. Like, there's no other. And honestly, I mean, at that point I was just like, this is just like the downtime that I need. Like,
Yeah.
like, Winston had taken himself to his own room and she was sitting there quietly wishing death on me. And I was like, okay, this is the only way I'm going to be able to regroup and make it through the rest of the day. So I guess we'll just sit here, and every few minutes I'd be like, are you ready to talk? And she would like turn her nose up at me and we'd go back to silence. And I was like, I'm actually okay with this. I know you think you're punishing me. Like, I'm okay. I need this.
Yeah. I'm
Um,
telling
but
you.
I mean, it's that, yeah, we can sit here and talk about what has worked for us. At the end of the day, different kids need different things, right?
Yeah.
Different things work for different kids. And knowing that and adjusting instead of being like, no, this is how I parent and it's going to work for you. Like,
Right.
that is not respecting your kid or yourself,
Right.
because when you dig your heels in so much and make your life more difficult, you're actually not respecting yourself either.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, so timeouts weren't a huge part of our existence. What I did more were apology letters that, I would sit down with the kiddo, and in the beginning it was like dictation of an apology letter and they would maybe just do their name or something like that. We didn't have to do them too often, but every once in a while, especially if it was like a friend that we played with every day or something, it was a great way to kind of acknowledge what we hadn't done well and how that might make the other person feel and all that kind of stuff and kind of move through those. So yeah, I mean, my kiddo wrote an apology letter. I think the last one that was written was maybe 3 years ago now. I remember the scenario because I remember literally it was an out school class and I got a message from the mom of the other
Mm-hmm.
kid and I wrote to the teacher and was like, was my kid the asshole? And her response was so politically correct. It was like, oh, he's very passionate about whatever. And I was like, yeah, my kid was. So, and now out school, the classes are all recorded, so I could go back and watch it. And I was like, so we're going to have to write an apology note to this kiddo. I'm like, how do you think that might have made him feel? And we kind of did that. And I scanned it and sent it to the mom, and the kid came back to class and we had a strategy going forward for how to make him feel welcome and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, but I was thinking about it, like this episode has been so much fun to plan for because, my oldest is almost 17. Like social media wasn't really around. I mean, I didn't even have Facebook when he was born. So I know some people did because it was kind of new, but I didn't have it. And forget about that. Now it's like Instagram and TikTok and everything else, right? And so now I feel like there's so much information out there. Like if I had known about pelvic floor, what is available to women today, we'd have an entirely different situation on our hands. There's all these videos about there for pregnant chicks about pelvic floor. And I'm like, I got nothing. I got from my male doctor, do a few Kegels, And same thing like with parenting and all that. I mean, I don't even think that we necessarily used terms back then like gentle, you parented, right? I mean, it wasn't discussed the way it is now. I wasn't a reader when my kids were born, which is shocking since I host how many book clubs in my life. But traditional education had killed my love of reading. I didn't get it back until after I had had kids. So I really kind of like parented by intuition, like whatever seemed appropriate is what I did. And so it's been fun now through this episode of like kind of really honing in on like exactly what I did and didn't do and where that lands on the spectrum of parenting, right? I was really big on prepping my kids before we went into a situation and letting them know what was expected of them, just kind of like behaviorally or anything like that. Like I very much remember there was always one, like whenever we were going to be at something where the rabbi was there, always being like, because he's the nicest man on earth, but like an imposing figure, right? Like it's an authoritarian figure, right? And I always remember there was like a constant, like one word answers are not the best answers, right? So like if the rabbi says like, how was your trip? Like good is an okay answer, but I think we could probably do a better answer. Why don't we practice some, and like trying to come up with like some examples so that at least when they went into something, because I feel like a lot of times when we talked about this in the brain, the frontal lobe and the executive function thing, right? Like we have expectations for our kids. We just assume that they're going to know how to behave in certain situations. And then when we don't, we're like, I can't believe you did that. And it's like, but if they've never done it or it's new to them or it's uncomfortable for them, we have to give them the tools that they need to feel comfortable there. So I was really surprised when we were researching for this episode that gentle parenting fell under authoritative parenting, according to Psychology Today. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And it talked about the fact because there are boundaries present, right? Like my kids do have boundaries. And so part of me started wondering, because there's a lady who does these comedy sketches on Instagram about gentle parenting where her kid, like, I think I sent the one to the group chat that we're both in where like her kid like throws a fork in a restaurant. It like imaginarily stabs somebody in the eye and she's gentle parenting. So she's like, oh, that's because he has unmet needs. And she's, like blowing it off. And I mean, it's all satire about gentle parenting, but it was hilarious. Right. And part of me wonders if there's a confusion or a line that's not been drawn between gentle parenting and permissive parenting. And that the two, that there's like it's been muddied between the two, because within gentle parenting, there are definitely guidelines and boundaries and things like that. It's just done gently, which was why when you and I were talking and you're like, I don't really identify that way. I'm like, but I see you as being so gentle, like the way you're doing your version then is so, so it's been interesting to kind of like create those categories and see kind of where each of us land. But yeah, I mean, my house very much runs like a democracy. My kids are just all in. They're full humans. We do have a joke that when I need it, my vote counts for double, right? And it's like, I very rarely, I couldn't even tell you the last time my vote counts for double. My parents live with us, and so my mom is kind of like my co-parent since my husband's always working. So Grammy's vote also counts for double. And so sometimes it's like if we have a vote and it's a really split decision and I've kind of got a feeling which way is going to be the successful way, every once in a while my double vote will come out, but for the most part it's pretty democratic.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think you bring up a good point, right? Because I do think a lot of people don't really understand. In general, there's gentle parenting theory that there are 4 types of parenting. And so there's authoritarian and authoritative. And people get those two mixed up a lot, right? So authoritarian is this idea of like, kind of that dictator, like my way, obedience, high level of demand, low level of support. Like you will do what I tell you to do, and that's the end of the story. And then you have this authoritative, which is this idea, they quote unquote call it like the Tinder teacher, right? This idea of, like you're guiding them, you are an authority on life compared to your child, but you're not, dictating what they have to do. You're trying to give guidance and those kinds of things. And then you get to permissive, which is, not necessarily a bad thing, right? But it's that idea of like they call it a low level of demand, but a high level of support. And so some people consider it like rather indulgent or just not enough boundaries for, healthy development. That's not necessarily this article or this podcast, right? Because we're talking about respect, not specifically parenting styles. But I think that authoritative, for me, the real distinction is gentle parenting is within that, but gentle parenting does have some pretty strict guidelines around, no external rewards, no external, or unrelated consequences. Like it has to be all natural consequences, no timeouts, these kinds of things. Whereas for me, I'm like, well, I think all of those things are okay in moderation. We definitely, if you get accepted into something big, or like we don't really care about report cards, but because of the system that we're in, we do sometimes get report cards, or we'll get, maybe you take a class online and they give you like a written report and it's a really great report. We'll go out for ice cream, like, hey, look, someone else said all of these great things about you, and it says that, like you did a really good job for the whole quarter or semester, and like I'm really proud of you for showing up that way, like let's go celebrate. And that's definitely an external reward, and I'm all about that kind of stuff, like not on the regular, not on the daily, but I think it's fun to be able to go get ice cream to celebrate a job well done, especially when it's
Yeah.
coming from somewhere not me, like as his mom and the one that is on him all the time about all of the things, when it comes from somewhere else. So, we definitely do that. And I do think natural consequences are great, but I also think that sometimes, actually a lot of times, life has something beyond a natural consequence. And so we implement those because I think it's important to know, like, hey, there are other consequences in the world, and this is what that might look like. Do I want to be a hard ass about it? Do I want to be unreasonable about it? No, like my goal is not to be an unreasonable parent, right? We're trying to kindly and gently lead kids into the next generation. And again, that's that idea of respect, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do it with respect? And I think there are a lot of ways you can do it, and you can do it gentle parenting or authoritative parenting. And you can probably also do it with permissive parenting. I think it probably gets a little bit harder with authoritarian parenting. But yeah, that would be a different podcast.
I feel like it was interesting, your example for external rewards. So for me, like we would do something like that. For us, it wouldn't be a reward though. It would be like a celebration, right? Like we would do that. Like for me, an external reward is more like, and I'm not saying your definition is wrong. Mine could totally,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, neither one of us has to be wrong. It could just be what it is.
Yeah.
But I could totally be like viewing this the wrong way. But like for me, I view external rewards as things like, if you read 10 books, you get to go to the Lego store, or if stuff like that, where it's
Hmm.
like more transactional, right? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Where it's like the terms were set out ahead of time and you're being coaxed towards something by a reward. Whereas yours, it's like, oh my gosh, this is such an awesome, like, great job. Like, let's go out and celebrate, like, so for
Mm-hmm.
me, those feel different. They might not to everybody else, but in my life, they feel different. Like I totally would be like, my kiddo will celebrate anything with sushi or Chipotle, like anything. He'll be like, I took the
Yeah.
trash out. I'm going to order myself a bowl. I'm like, have a great day. He's got his own debit card now, so he's good. You know?
Well, and maybe it does come down to the intention behind it, because I also would not necessarily have a problem with, like, hey, when you complete this thing,
Right.
whether it's reading 10 books or, a big project or something, we'll go to the Lego store and get a Lego. And that is an external reward, but I can't imagine tying it to something that I really didn't think he was going to do, right?
Mm.
It's more of a, like, you had a goal, you set out, you finished it, you achieved it, like, let's go celebrate.
You sweeten the
And
pot.
so, yeah, it's like a celebration of an accomplishment achieved, a job well done. Like, he's not going to get a bonus, he's not going to get a paycheck bonus in our house, but he might get an extra Lego set,
Right.
or, a fun reason to go for whatever kind of food he wants, or whatever the case may be. So I think the distinction between external reward and celebration, that's maybe semantics. Maybe the bigger issue is like the intention behind it. Like,
Right. I could see
are
that.
you, pushing them to do something they don't necessarily want to do? And I will say, I think we're both fairly anti-rewards charts. And that is definitely a version of external motivation and external reward that, it just never really worked in our house. And also, I don't know. I mean, I guess if it works for you and you're happy doing it, by all means, go on with your bad self. I don't think you're ruining your child with it, but that is way more work than I want to put in,
Right.
right? Like that takes a lot of work on the parents' part to like track all of it and keep track of it and make sure you've always got the right stickers to put on the chart and like make a new chart when that one gets full. Like I don't have no, like no.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's natural in parenting that there's going to be like, acknowledgement of things well done, Like I
Mhm.
remember, okay, so we potty trained the first kid. And when I say we, I mean, okay, I had a nanny when my kids were smaller because I worked full time, and I've explained before, having a nanny is cheaper than putting 3 kids in daycare. So the nanny pretty much potty trained the first kid, and it was smooth. 2 days, done. Boom, amazing. Second kid, holy shit. Like, I'm just thrilled she uses a potty now. It took so long. Like, it was so bad, right? So, first kid got stickers every time he went potty. And he hadn't really had stickers before because he was pretty young. And so it was exciting to get a sticker. We had Lightning McQueen stickers. He was super excited. Second kid comes around and like, same jam, make a sticker chart, put the sticker. Great. She was like, I use stickers all the time. Like she was always doing
Yeah.
crafts with the nanny and stuff. So she's like, that's not special.
Mhm.
Literally, oh my gosh, what was the song? I think it's Shake Senora by Harry Belafonte is the song. We would play it on the we had an iPod on a docking station. This is the
Yeah.
time period we're talking about, right?
Mhm.
And when she would go potty, we would have a dance party to Harry Belafonte. Like that was how it took freaking forever. I'll listen to Harry Belafonte for the rest of my life and think about it. Like, but I think like so I mean there is some of that stuff, right? That's like like oh my gosh, you did it. Like awesome celebration. So I
Mhm.
mean, I think it's just like you said, the intention and finding the balance of like what strikes with your kid where they're like, "Oh my gosh, I did do it. Like this is great."
Mhm.
So
Yeah, well, that kind of flows perfectly into what I was thinking for the next topic to talk about with the idea of respect. And that's around consent and respecting personal space. And those are two separate topics, but they,
they
can definitely
intertwine.
go together. Yeah. So
Yeah.
like, I'm, I I know for me personally, I'm not a big hugger. I don't particularly like hugs. I happy to see you. I'm here for you, but let's do it with personal space intact. And my kiddo seems to have gotten that as well. He's not a big hugger. When he was little, he definitely wasn't a big cuddler. He definitely cuddles more now at this kind of stage than he did when he was smaller. And there's a lot of compelling research, right, out there, especially now, probably less so a decade or even 2 decades ago. But there's a lot of research now about the importance of bodily autonomy and consent to any physical touch, starting from a very young age. I don't necessarily know that I'm all in. Actually, I know that I'm not all in on the idea of the gentle parenting idea of like, ask for consent to change your child's diaper, like a baby's diaper. Like this, I'm like, I'm sorry, you don't actually have to say, I'm going to change your diaper. It's time to change. It smells terrible. And I don't want a rash because then that's a whole other thing. And then you're
Right.
screaming at me. And like, but, from a very young age, this idea of giving permission to touch or whatever. And so we implemented this in our home. No one has to give anyone a hug or cuddles or a kiss. Though I will say we did end up having to kind of compromise on that a little. And with Winston, it was you had to always offer either a hug or a high five when saying hello and goodbye, right? So like that acknowledgement in both of our extended families, like hugs, hello are a really big deal. And so that, like, okay, well, you can't just stand there with your arms at your side. Again, one of those kind of expectations of like, we have to
Right.
teach kids, and so like there has to be an acknowledgement. And so, would you rather do a high five or a hug? And I mean, Winston almost always chose the high five, right? He almost always picked a high five for hello and goodbye, which caused quite a few problems with our extended family, even when we explained all of the things and the reasons and all of that jazz, ahead of time and tried to clue them in on what we were doing and why we were doing it. It caused a lot of issues. Um, and going kind of like the next step, like as he's gotten older and new things, like I'll be the first to admit I am terrible about just like barging into the bathroom or like knocking on his bedroom door and popping my head in before I've gotten the like come in kind of thing. That said, we do have a pretty open door policy in our house. Like the bathroom door is hardly ever closed. And that's just how it is, right? And there's, like nudity is a generally acceptable thing in our home for everyone, and we don't have a lot of things around that, and it's still okay. I mean, at some point Winston might not be okay with it anymore, and that might
Right.
change the dynamic of how things work, but we're working on like body positivity, and like nudity is just nudity. It's not an invitation for anything, and you don't have to be weird about it, and like kind of all of these ideas and things. I don't know. I can't remember the last time I took a shower and no one came into the bathroom at some point, right?
Mhm.
Like, but I do know at the same time, I have a tween boy. He's 10, soon to be 11. So I probably do need to work on this and find that balance of like, so we have an open door policy and people are allowed to barge in on me whenever they want, but like I have to make sure that I knock and wait for permission for the boy, like, so like how does that work in your house?
So similar, right? And it was interesting. So, okay, when my kids went to preschool way back when, we had this program that the preschool brought in called Kids Safe. And Kids Safe was awesome. They talked about bodily autonomy. They talked about, it was just safety in general, right? So it was bodily autonomy, it was stove safety, it was gun safety, it was, all of the above, right? Who it talked about secrets and when is a secret okay, when is a secret not okay. They identified a circle of safe adults, who are your safe
Mhm.
adults, the difference between tattling and reporting. It was an awesome program for my kids, right? So uh, every year they had parent night where the parents could come in and hear what our kids were learning and you could ask questions and whatever. And so one of the questions I asked was about the bathroom, right? Because at that point, my kids, we'd come home from the beach and my kids would all get in the shower with, I mean, we had a really big shower. The kids would all get in the
Mhm.
shower. Everybody would work in. I mean, it was like not weird at all. And so I was like, at what age does that become weird? And I shouldn't allow that anymore?
Mhm.
Um, and the lady said, you'll know when it becomes weird because something will happen. And I was
Mhm.
like, oh, so she said she, with her own boy at whatever age, they were in the shower and she's doing her soap, he's doing his soap, whatever, no big deal. And he says to her, can you do jumping jacks? And she's like, of course I know how to do jumping jacks. And he was like, no, like right now. And she realized that he wanted to see her breasts move. He was curious, right? And she was like, and then I knew we were done, right? like and we talked about it. They had a healthy conversation, but she's like, at that
Yeah.
point, he was done showering with me,
Mhm.
still hasn't happened in our house. Like it's never gotten weird. I mean, I don't lay on the couch naked reading a book, but if I am in the shower, any and all of my children will come in. At some points, all of them will come in, right?
Mhm.
And right next to my shower, there's this really big soaking tub, this like modern monstrosity. It was with the house when we got it. My oldest child will lay in there and he's usually laying facing the other way because of the way the drain is, so his back is to me, but obviously he got in there and I was in the shower, and he'll lay there
Mhm.
and just like talk to me about his day while I'm in the shower. And I'm like, you know what, I think there's a thing, like we're not distracted, we're not
Mhm.
busy, they don't, it's like at night they'll come into my bed and just kind of like curl up, and it's like they know that it's open, it's not, they're not intruding, they're not interrupting. Like sometimes I think they think maybe that you're too busy, which is a shame that we kind of give off that vibe sometimes. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm probably guilty of it. So yeah, like we no longer shower together, but like that would be super weird. I would never walk in on him while he was in the shower. Like sometimes he'll yell like my towel's in the dryer and I'll just kind of like open the door and like slip my hand through and let
Mhm.
him, because I think I've gotten the vibe that that's his comfort zone. So it's interesting, like you said, right? They can all come in while I'm in the shower, but I would, my daughter, it's different because it's all the same stuff. And, she and I talk about periods and boobs and all kinds of stuff, so like for her, it's not as weird. If she's in the shower and I need something, I'll run up and grab it from her bathroom. But
Mhm.
yeah, so that was the instruction that I was given, was like, you'll know when it gets weird. And
Yeah.
it's morphed a little bit, but we still haven't gone to like a completely closed door, like no nudity thing. It's still nudity, right? It's still,
Mhm.
and I did not grow up in that house. So it
Mhm.
was just kind of like figuring out where that boundary was and what was comfortable for us. But yeah, I mean, it's never really gotten weird. So like, okay.
Yeah. I we have pretty much kind of that same idea of like, when it's awkward for him, you'll be able to tell, or when
Right.
there's an issue. And also for right now, right, our whole family uses one bathroom because the second bathroom is my podcast recording studio. But I figure at some point when he doesn't want to run the risk of someone coming into the bathroom while he's in the bathroom, he'll be like, "Yo, can I get my bathroom back?"
Yeah.
And, that'll be a different conversation and I'll have to come up with a new way to set up my studio. It'll still have to be this bathroom. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do because we're in a condo. We can't really add on another room, right? Like, oh, we'll just add a room that's an office and podcast recording studio. But,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll make it work. But yeah, otherwise I totally agree about the hugs, the kisses, the whole thing. Yeah. I mean, it's bodily autonomy. It's an important
Mhm.
thing. So yeah, I mean, and we do that similar things, but just kind of in, different fields, right? Of like just respecting their lead and all of that. But again, with that, there are boundaries within gentle parenting. So for example, their room is their space. Two of my kids have clean rooms, one of them not so much. And it like I open the door and it gives me like, oh my gosh, right? So, but that's your space. As long as it doesn't spill out into the hallway and I can close the door and I don't have to look at it, I'm okay with it, right? But there's a boundary. There's no food allowed on the second floor. The only time that you're allowed to bring food to the second floor is if like my youngest will sometimes have like 3 back-to-back classes on Outschool or online or something. And he'll come down and like grab a snack in between, but he'll just like take it up, eat it in class, and then bring whatever is back down. Like if you're in a class, and obviously I don't want you to go hungry. And sleep and wake schedules in our house. But again, and this kind of is what got me thinking before when I was saying like when my kids were younger versus today. When my kids were younger, they had bedtimes. They had a schedule. My kids napped like I sleep trained my kids. From the day they came home from the hospital, they were in their cribs and sleep trained. And, my oldest took 2 naps a day until he was like 6 years old. Not by
Oh
my choice,
gosh.
by his choice. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. When we pulled him back to the 1 nap, he was devastated. Like.
Winston dropped naps at 2, like right at 2 on the dot. And I was like, oh no,
Uh,
I'm not ready. But he was never a great napper. He was
I
a
know.
great nighttime sleeper, never a great napper. So it
Liam
was what it was.
Liam's been an insomniac his whole life. He pretty much never napped. It was brutal, like
Hmm.
absolutely brutal. But the first 2, narcoleptics, like I swear, right? So, but now when they're teenagers, I will step in occasionally and say, like, it's time for bed. Like, you guys, it's been too many like late nights in a row. Can you please try to get to bed a little bit earlier tonight? Like, this isn't a super healthy, way to maintain and whatever. But, you know, as an adult, could you imagine like you don't feel tired at all and somebody's like, go to bed and you're like, well, but I'm not tired. Like, why are you like, they're at a point now where they can read their own bodies and they know when they're tired. Every once in a while, they might ignore that still. And so I'll say, hey, let's make sure we're using our daytime time wisely so that you're not working on, a school project or a personal project until like 4 a.m. Like, could we please do that? But generally speaking, they have a ton of autonomy over their days and how they run and, all that kind of stuff. Like they know when they're hungry, they know when they're tired, they, go do your thing. They're good. And they do. It works for us.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, I think that's it. So I know we have kind of talked back and forth about it a little, mentioned it a little earlier in the episode, but the experts say that gentle parenting is a type of authoritative parenting. And you are all in on the gentle parenting, but maybe a bit eclectic with a little bit of research, maybe eclectic, leaning heavily towards gentle
Yeah, there you
parenting.
go.
And me, not so much. I do feel like for the most part, I'm a pretty textbook authoritative parenting style, probably because I did a lot of the parenting book reading when I was pregnant. Bed rest will do that to you. You got a whole lot of time to do a whole lot of parenting reading if you need. That said, I really liked this snippet when we were doing some research. I found this snippet from Emily Oster. I think that's how you say her name. She's great. She's written some good books. She's done tons of research. And so she had this thing on parent data that I thought summed it up really nicely. So, like I said, she's done loads and loads of research on parenting in general and written about it. This specific topic, she was looking at gentle parenting and basically found that there isn't enough actual research to support or not support gentle parenting specifically over some other authoritative methods. Again, authoritative, not authoritarian. But she says, quote, if we want to be taking data-based approach to parenting practices, we should start with what we know from data, which is don't hit, try not to yell or get angry, and be consistent. The thing is, there are a lot of different ways to do this that could cover all of these bases. And I think, right, like those, as silly as it sounds, those are kind of like the 3 things you have to like fundamentally do these things to respect your kids in your family, right?
Yeah.
Like don't hit them. Getting physical is never the right thing to do. And it's still really prevalent in a lot of communities, in a lot of circles. Try not to yell or get angry. And that's, again, that try, right? Like
We all
I
have our moments.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Like I've got an Irish temper, and I'm not a redhead, but you might think that, like all of those stereotypes out there, like I, but I also own it. I try really hard to make sure that I'm like, wow, I'm sorry, like that was not good.
It's not
And
amazing. Yeah.
like, because it's reality,
Yeah.
like I have all kinds of counseling. I still get angry, and I own it and take responsibility for it, because I respect my child enough
Mhm.
to model that for them, and to also apologize for not handling the situation well with them. Like, they don't have to be my dumping ground just because they're my kiddo, right? And
Yeah.
then again, be consistent. Like, I don't know, in every interpersonal relationship you have, which again, I think we both agree that those rules should extend to your children, right? Consistency is how
Yeah.
you show that you respect someone.
Mhm.
Showing up time and time again, having those boundaries and holding them, and just kind of all of those things. It's like the ultimate show of respect, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love it. All right. Well, tell us in the comments, if you would, what you think your parenting style might be. And if it's eclectic with a touch of this and a touch of that, that's okay too, right? Tell
Yep.
whatever you think it is. Tell us in the comments what you think it might be, or maybe you're trying to work really hard to parent differently than you were parented. And that's a whole different struggle that we haven't even gone into today, right? But that would be a whole thing, because you're having to kind of break those cyclical things and those habitual things that you're feeling. But yeah, tell us in the comments your thoughts after today's episode. We are looking forward to hearing them. We've got another thing that we would love your comments on and your thoughts on. We haven't done this segment in a while, but I'm pretty pumped for it. Are you ready for some fun, Amanda?
I am. Let's do it.
Am I the asshole? Tell me. I just have to know.
These are always fun. We haven't had an Am I the Asshole in a super long time. I'm excited.
Yeah.
All right.
If you have one, feel free to send it in. If you would like us to give our 2 cents, and anyone else to be able to weigh in, feel free to send it in. But we do have one this week.
Yeah, I know. So anything parenting related, homeschooling related, etc. If you're wondering if you're the asshole, let us know. So Amy writes, my son has 2 best friends. Unfortunately, those best friends don't particularly like each other. This means I feel like I'm constantly trying to schedule time for him to play with one friend or the other. We get along really well with the parents of one friend. We'll call him Kevin for the purposes of our Am I the Asshole? And admittedly, that means we see Kevin and his family more often. My son's other best friend, Molly, not so much. We just really struggle to enjoy spending time with her parents and don't really want to do family things together. Recently, Molly's mom especially wants to do things together, us moms and the 2 kids, and I just really don't want to. Am I the asshole for sending my husband in my place for play dates so the kids can still see each other, but I don't have to deal with mommy bonding time? All right. What do you think, Amanda?
Well, I mean, I'm of 2 minds, I suppose, right? Like, on the one hand, you don't have to bond with anyone that you don't want to bond with. And, if it's not a good relationship, you shouldn't necessarily have to put yourself out there. And I do wholeheartedly believe that play dates and things like that should not fall only on mom. I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in the fact that, like, dad also has a role in helping oversee these or be the chaperone or whatever. So sending dad isn't necessarily a bad thing in any way, shape, or form in my mind. Um, though I do think that you should probably make sure that Molly's mom knows dad is coming instead of you.
Yeah.
She thinks you're coming, and then all of a sudden your husband rolls up to hang out with her for 3 hours. That might be a little weird, and
Yeah.
like maybe verging on, yeah, maybe you were the asshole.
Yeah. Yeah. Give a little heads up there, right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm pretty guilty, and I'm not saying this is the right thing to do. I'm pretty guilty of putting my kids' needs before my own. And so I probably would suck it up and do it. It would depend on what the issue is with Molly's mom. Like, right? If she's like a homophobic, racist asshole, like I'm out, you know. Although at that point I probably also wouldn't want my kid to be friends with her kid
Yeah.
because that's gonna spill over and whatever, right? So I'd have a really hard time sitting there listening to her, you know, do all this. That's a tough one. Oh my God. I wonder how old these kids are too, right? If they're enough that like maybe once they get together a couple of times, it could be like, hey, how about I have Molly over to my place and then you have my kid over to your place, you know, and then you could like alternate a little bit and like
Yeah.
maybe if you put your time in the beginning, it'll fade.
Yeah, you'll be able to get to that point. Maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
All right. So before we wrap up and give the mantra of the day, we just want to remind you, we talked earlier about the fact that we have our Patreon and we do live Q&A and curriculum discussion and all of those kinds of things. And then we also have like a separate, you know, like social aspect, like a mom's night out kind of thing. But if you want to do just a more general day in, day out, like get together and get some support or advice or talk parenting styles or learn about it, you know, how am I going to implement a new parenting style? Come find our community on Facebook.
Help me find my passport. We
Yeah.
had a where is Meagan's passport hiding thread not that long ago. So here it is. I
Yeah.
found it. If you listened last week, it's
Exactly.
back. Okay.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, we talk homeschooling and we talk all sorts of other things too. So, truly, if you're just looking for a friendly, supportive corner on social media, you know, it's not easy to find, but we are there. Come join us in our Facebook group. It is very surprisingly called Homeschool Moms Unfiltered. On Facebook, you can just Google it. We have our regular business page where we put clips, but then there's a social group. It does require approval. You have to answer a few questions, and we're going to check and make sure that, generally speaking, it looks like you're not an asshole because we don't allow the mean girls into the club, generally speaking. Yeah. So come join us on Facebook. And I guess, do you want to go ahead and wrap us up with our mantra today?
I can do that. Yeah. So our mantra for the week is parenting isn't one size fits all. Find what works for your family, but don't be afraid to question, adapt, and keep growing along the way. Solid advice.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Easier said than done, but
Ooh,
good
yes.
advice.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in. We've got our book club episode coming up this week. We're reading The Danish Way of Raising Teens. If you don't have teens, come anyway. It's applicable to all. So come and hang out with us. But in the meantime, happy homeschooling.
Yeah, have a great one.